Didn't even talk to her yet. Hell.
What are y'all doing? Y'all starting the show already? Hang up. Are you doing it on this device? Really, Grace? Really? All right. I'll make do. We'll make do. Yeah, give me about 5 minutes. Okay, we'll be fine. Go ahead. Yeah, I got to. Hello, Savannah. Hello, hello, hello. And welcome to another edition of Candidly Kesha. It is a pleasure to be with you on this evening. Welcome to our chilly weather here in Savannah. Listen, we are going to talk all things taxes, T-SPLOST, and our local city government. Today, we spent an entire day from about 8:30 until about 4 o'clock in our annual budget retreat, which generally is over a 2-day period, but it was scheduled for one day. And so we sat and listened to the various departments give presentations with regard to their budget plan. And that's essentially what the budget is. It is a financial plan of action, of intentions. And so it's our job to make sure that we are interjecting your voice into the budget process. Now, how far your voice will go depends on your advocacy, because we have learned that throughout the course of doing this work, as we are in the majority, those of us who are truly fighting and on the front lines of representing all of Savannah, we are often tasked with mobilizing the electorate to engage, get involved, and come into our local government with a collective voice, as in what we saw play out with the Calhoun Square. We've had many instances where when a group, an organization, or a set of people desire something, it is only through that collective voice and their collective efforts that they get to see the light of day where our agenda is concerned. As you know, when we first arrived in City Hall, upon our arrival at City Hall, I should say, There was some maneuvering. First, there was an attempt to change the charter. Then, when that failed, there was an attempt to now change the rules of council to where we would mimic a strong mayor form of government as opposed to a weak mayor form of government, which by way of our charter, that's what we have. And so the beauty of what our charter reads is that one person cannot make all of the decisions. And that was deliberate, that was by design. And so we find ourselves on the other side of that. We, as in myself, Alderwoman Blakely, and Alderwoman Lanier, but we are still at the table fighting the good fight, identifying ways wherein we can backdoor our way into changing that. Like we did with our recreation and our Little League coaches. We saw that the rise in crime primarily was attributed to the fact that our youth didn't have anything to do. But we also learned that there was prohibitive factors that prevented them essentially from engaging. And that was simply providing equipment, making sure that they had access to fields, making sure that those fields were lit. And so those coaches mobilized, they engaged, they came to our city hall for the first time. The city manager, a city manager, met with a group of local coaches here in our city at a round table, or oval table rather, and had discussions about their needs and how the city could meet those needs. And so we are so excited about the opportunity to see what kind of outcomes they are going to have at the end of next year. And so we are continuously advocating for more. We cannot give enough or a return. We don't give anything. It's all y'all's money anyway, right? You are our taxpayers. You contribute to the coffers of the city of Savannah. And so what we want you to know is that we are there to advocate for you for your return on investment. And that's one of the reasons why we did not support TSPLOST. TSPLOST is a transportation tax which provides funding for roads, sidewalks, infrastructure, and throughout our communities. Well, we know that historically those type of tax dollars via sales tax and SPLOST dollars do not often find a way back to our communities. The communities wherein we have individuals who are the most vulnerable. And so oftentimes those are also the communities where there's the greatest need. And so in this case, we, in the face of us coming out of a pandemic, in the face of the city of Savannah, the county of Chatham, receiving in excess of $100 million via ARPA, American Relief Protection Act funds, the federal bailout, as well as the fact that we had not fully rolled back. A lot of talk is made about having the lowest tax rate millage rate since 1987. But the fact of the matter is, what they will not say is that it could have been actually lower than since 1987, and it really is not all that low. But we want you to recognize that factor where when politicians parade around your communities, your events, your activities, your neighborhood association meetings, and if they are not speaking language that's consistent with rolling back the millage rate, we want you to know that they are not doing the very best that they can by you if they haven't communicated with you why your property taxes have increased. You should know that the values of property here in Savannah, even in the lower value neighborhoods, taxes are going to increase because the values all over the city of Savannah are increasing steadily over the last couple of years, and we suspect that that will be the case again. So 1, we did not fully roll back the millage. 2, we are recipients of huge federal dollars via opera funds. 3, we're coming out of a pandemic, right? And fourth, for me, there really was no real buy-in from the community. There was no priority, and there was very little communication as to what that TSPLOST tax would actually pay for. And because that was not the case, all of those factors in its totality uh, proved to be problematic for me in my vote. But ultimately, I should tell you, ultimately, are the dynamics associated with how T-Splosh was marketed and who marketed T-Splosh, right? And so we are constantly advocating for transparency. We're constantly advocating for things to be above board within our local government. And when you have individuals who market T-Splosh be the same individuals who do big business with the city of Savannah and the county of Chatham, i.e., engineering firms, architect firms, attorneys, contractors, developers, those individuals collectively with the chamber, Savannah Chamber, invested $125,000. $125,000 to market T-Splosh. To market T-Splosh to tell you to tax yourself more. How could we, in our good conscience, tell the citizens of Savannah to tax themselves more when a carton of eggs is $6 and $7? How could we, in the face of where we are with the fiscal vulnerabilities in our community and in our families, how can we tell you to tax yourself more only to create this slush fund so that these entities, these individuals have these automatic contractual agreements that they historically get time and time again. And in return for those major dollars, millions of dollars that they will get as the engineer for this project A, project C, D, E, F, B, they then turn around and give the bulk of that they turn around and give the bulk of a maxed out campaign contribution to the chairman of Chatham County, to the mayor of Savannah. That's how that game works, right? And so to prove this, we pulled the records. We pulled the records and we could see where the individuals who were contributors to marketing T-Splosh, to advertising T-Splosh, to paying for those big green billboards with the penny, to paying those who paid for those trifold brochures, those green ones that went around to your neighborhood associations and to your organizations and sat on the counters of businesses you frequent, those yard signs that you saw, all of that was paid for by the individuals who do the business with the city, with the county. And you can pull the agendas of the city and the county, and you will see those firms as agenda items. But more than that, you pull the financial disclosures of some of our sitting local politicians, and you could match their names. See, that's how that game is played. And that's why they want us to shut up and not talk. And that's why there's an attempt to sully us, discredit us, and make us appear to not know what we're talking about. And in some instances, like tonight, we're just called flat out liars and that we don't know what we're talking about. But the beauty of all of this is the electorate is becoming so much more engaged, so much more educated and plugged in to this political process. They are now not only recognizing the game, they are saying game over. Not only do you recognize the game, you are actually saying game over. We're not playing the game anymore. And so tonight, as I went about with my advocacy, primarily speaking to citizens on Facebook and in our local neighborhood association meetings, I basically had individuals reaching out wanting to know more information about my position and why my position was what it is. And so we shared very candidly with some individuals. And one person who is my guest tonight, she sent me a message via Facebook. And she will be with us shortly. Let's see. If she's not in yet, producer will give her a minute. But she sent me a message, and her message read, I've never met this person in my life. I don't know who she is. She says, TSPLOST is a gentrification project slush fund. Okay, 7973. Hold on 1 second. I'm sorry. Give me a second, guys. She's having technical difficulty. Let's see here. So, her message read, TSPLOST is a gentrification project slush fund, and you can see and read for yourself as the Skidaway Road widening project is number one on that TSPLOST list. For 2 decades, Chatham County and Savannah politicians have been pushing a road project to gentrify Sandfly and bulldoze their historic church, Speedwell Methodist Church, located at Skidaway Road and Montgomery Crossroads. Those Black people are descendants of slaves freed from Wormslow Plantation. All their homes, their cemeteries, and churches have been in their families for hundreds of years. Anyone who votes for TSPLOST and any group or politician who pushes it only is out to enrich themselves by undermining residents just like Sandfly out of their property cheap through use of eminent domain. They've been exposed for 2 decades in national news media like New York Times and LA Times. Teresa Scott of the Georgia Department of Transportation explains that the state and federal government refused to fund any road project that would destroy that historic Black community known as Sandfly. So when she sent me this, I was quite intrigued, and she sent me several pictures that I'm going to have her go through. But for me, it was validating that one, not only were we doing the right thing, but two, there was another voice to this, in that this was not just some way to be antagonistic or to resist something for the sake of resistance. And so that was as far from the truth as anything. And so she asked if she could come on tonight to talk about this TSPLOST tax and how residents all over the county should continue to mobilize and allow their voice to be heard, but more to the point, to demand that there be representation from their elected officials in a way that they could trust. And no longer are they inclined to just go along to get along. And so I'm not sure, Mr. Producer, what's going on with my guests, but I'm trying to filibuster as long as I can. There we go. There we go. So hi, Miss Scott. How are you? Well, so listen, as she gets settled, I was concerned because usually when people send me something, I like to protect their identity and maintain confidentiality. But in this regard, she says, please use my name. I don't care. These people need to know. Ms. Scott went on to say that Tom Barton published a letter that she wrote um, in terms of I think you wrote it in response to a companion editorial, and you had the black local newspapers publish your letter as well, and identified it as a scandal. Polly Cooper dedicated a section in Historic Owl of Hope about Sandfly and all of those families out there. Wonderful, kind, and generous people, you described them. And you go on to say the book is on sale at the Georgia Historical Society. Edna Jackson was a one-term mayor over this scandal. Anything you say we could use. And so tonight, I wanted to honor your voice on this platform. And I read the first part, Miss Scott, where you talk about TSPLOST being a gentrification tax that essentially politicians who are seeking to pad their pockets and divide our community. I'm going to stop talking and just let you take us to school on this a little bit.
Well, I've been the director of the Bacon Park Neighborhood Association for a long time. I grew up here. We're a military family. I was born at Hunter when it was an Air Force base. And my dad was a career violent crimes detective after he retired from the military. So I've been in Savannah for a while, and I have lived next door to this beautiful, warm, historic Black community all of my life. The people, those Black people, have been my school teachers, my schoolmates, and my friends. And everyone who lives on this side of town, whether you're Bacon Park, between Bacon Park and Isle of Hope and say Skidaway Island and Ferguson Avenue, knows these people personally and have watched for 2 decades what looks like someone just taking a battering ram and going after them, and especially their church, which is known as Speedwell Methodist Church at the corner of Skidaway and Montgomery Crossroads. And back in 2010, I really noticed when they were coming on with the Skidaway Road project. And reason I wrote what I did about TSPLOST is that Skidaway Road project was the very first project. So I just want to say to Mayor Van Johnson that you saying and talking about the people and about the I-95 corridor and all of that, the I-95 corridor and everything else you talked about in the mayor's address that he normally does on Saturday was not the first project on that TSPLOST list. It was gentrifying that Black neighborhood known as Sandfly. And this is the tip-off. As bad as the congestion and the traffic flow is at Skidaway and Victory Drive, they don't ever start there with the Skidaway Road project. It has to be at that corner, and it has to be with bulldozing that Black church down and forcing those people into a bankruptcy sale of their home. And this has been going on for 2 decades. The New York Times and the Los Angeles Times wrote a story when Sam's and Walmart was going out there. Remember, one of the family members out there sold a piece of property. And the encroachment did not stop after that. It was very controversial about what was happening, that they were losing their culture, they were losing their community. And so when the Skidaway Road project came along, which we voted on that back in the 80s, I actually went back and looked at the original vote on the original TSPLOST. The Department of Transportation, the lady's name is Teresa Scott, and she said that the Skidaway Road project was obsolete. It wasn't necessary anymore because of the Truman Parkway. Okay, so the Skidaway Road project wasn't necessary anymore. And actually, the Truman Parkway just sits, just right there, right behind that church. And that the state and federal government would not supply funding that would destroy a historic community like that. And so that's the reason they have to use TSPLOST and they have to, look for money like that, is because the state and federal government considers it an obsolete project and that it's unnecessary. They recognize it for what it is. It's a greed project. Right. And I'm going to go ahead and name some names. One of the number one people behind this, who was behind it in the beginning, is Patrick Shea, a former county commissioner chairman. Okay? Not chairman, but he was a county commissioner for this district. Bobby Lockett holds his seat now. And he's always in the wings. He's always in the background, and I know this because when I was up there at the courthouse, and at the time, Patrick Monahan was the county manager, and he said I could go up there in the county engineering office and look at anything they had. And they got Patrick Shea on the phone because I was up there, and he wasn't even our county commissioner anymore. So that's how involved I knew he was. I also had a copy of an agenda from back around 2011 when they were trying to build that Oglethorpe Charter School, that it wasn't just a school. And I kept telling everybody that when I was looking at the plans for this school, that they were going to come all the way down to Montgomery Crossroads, and basically they were going to get rid of all those people that live in there. They were going to force them out. I think one of the most interesting comments, because, I went on every page where they were advertising TSPLOST, and one lady had a comment that was very interesting. And this is very important, and especially to the Black community. I don't want you to believe anything that I say. I have a paper trail. Read it and know it for yourself. But I want you to remember that. She said, well, it's not just the Black community. I said, well, you're right. That doesn't matter. They'll do it to anybody. And you need to be aware of what they're doing when they're gentrifying your community. But over on Limerick Street, which ran up beside Bacchus Cadillac, that street on on the first block was just businesses like the Dover Elevator Company, and there was like really reputable businesses back there. And then on the other side of the street was mostly residential houses. And the city of Savannah bought a house and they condemned it. And then they declared it surplus property, which brought the property value to zero. Well, guess what happened to everybody else's property value on that street, on Limerick Street? They ended up having, if you're holding a $200,000 mortgage, for example, and a government comes in with eminent domain or doing something like that and buying something and declare it surplus property, they just tank your property value.
Right.
And you're forced into a bankruptcy sale where you're going to sell your property real cheap. So go over there to Limerick Street with what used to be Bacchus Cadillac and tell me if you see anybody's business there anymore, because you won't. And those developers got it really cheap. And that was the point, is that it's these developers and these people who are involved in that. So you really do. So, and that's what I told her when I kept bringing up this issue with sandfly. Back in January, I had a neighborhood association meeting. It was a crime watch meeting. And one person who has a friend who's a county engineer spoke up about the need for that roundabout at Montgomery Crossroads and Skidaway Road. And the hair on the back of my head stood up. And I knew right then that TSPLOST was coming. This was before anybody said anything about TSPLOST or that it was coming, that these people were going to look for another avenue to try to bulldoze their way into that Black community. And I don't care. I've had only one person make derogatory comments, and I don't care what he said. I've seen what his house looks like, and he's not one to talk about what people think their houses look down there. It's theirs. It belongs to them. It's been in their families for 200 years. Those residents are descendants from the slaves that came off of Warren Slow Plantation. That church is the site of Emancipation Proclamation. All that land belongs in their family. It has been for years. They're all related to one another. One of the things that really compelled me to stand up and write that letter to the editor, and I really appreciate Tom Barton, the opinion editor at the time, he wrote a companion piece next to it. And this went out in the Sunday's paper about what they were trying to do. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how we found out about everything. But there's a lady that was a member of that church, a Sandfly resident. She paid on a life insurance policy for probably the better part of her life, so that when she died, $10,000 would go into a building fund, and she could get her name on a stained glass window in that church. And that alone was enough for me to write that letter, and enough for me to say, I don't care if you use my name. That was enough for me. That is faith. That is faith. And, to me, it's just very egregious for a city that promotes itself constantly for historic preservation, except when it comes to that spot.
Right.
So I don't hear it. The way that we found out about this is there was a whistleblower. There always is. You'd be surprised about what I find in my mailbox or what somebody slips up under my door. So there's always a paper trail and there's always a whistleblower. And so a newspaper reporter got through the Freedom of Information Act, went up there to the Chatham County Commissioner's office and was able to get all their emails about everybody that was involved. So when I wrote that letter to the editor, I named Edna Jackson, who was mayor at the time, and Mary Ellen Sprague, because there were emails that they were a part of. So anybody denying that they weren't a part of it or weren't aware of it is lying. The pastor at the time, who's no longer there, they dismissed him, of course, was trying to tell them that they were going to move to another church down the road. But what they didn't realize is that Speedwell Methodist Church has a cash asset, a very large one. Their cash asset would have been following and gone to that church down the road. Now, that in itself is very bad. With no notice, you weren't going to tell anybody or say anything, and you were just going to spring it on them like that. And they would have never known that their church was sold if a whistleblower had come to me and I hadn't poked the bear at the news.
She been messing with us.
But I will tell you,
Scott, can you back up? What you broke up when you said if I hadn't poked the bear? Can you start back from there?
Yes, I really appreciate when I wrote that letter. Mr. Barton loved to edit my letters because, I always tell people I'm not white, I'm Scottish, and I've got that bluntness about me, which is, when people try to wipe you off the face of the earth, that's the reason things like this are very sensitive to me as a Scottish person.
I guess
you feel very, yeah. And so I kept after him. And he edited the letter and told me when he was going to publish it.
Wow. Well,
and a lot of that had to do with what came out of the Freedom of Information Act, when all the emails and all of their communications and how deep they were involved in this, and how they were not going to let anybody who was a member of that church, who really paid for and built that church, they were going to let them know anything.
Listening to you, I think about the old saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So much of what you are saying tonight is reminiscent of what we experienced with the Weeping Time, what we are going through with the fairgrounds right now, and what happened with Calhoun Square. It's a culture that is so strong in this city. Anyone would be crazy to think that they could actually change it because it's so pervasive. How have you stood the test of time? And in comparison to what you went through back then and experience in helping to preserve and save that church, tell me, what do you see as a parallel of what's happening today as you've watched the government?
Well, there is strength in numbers, and I can tell you exactly what happened. Anita Adair, who was the president of the Isle of Hope Neighborhood Association, showed up with about 200 of those prominent doctors and lawyers from Isle of Hope when they were down there having their closed door meeting, and had a couple of Sandfly residents in there intimidating them. And engineer stood at the door with his clipboard and told her she wasn't allowed to go in, and she took his clipboard and threw it across the yard, and they just stormed the door and went on in. And pretty much at the time, Albert Scott, cousin Scott, I call him my cousin, he and Helen Stone were just told point blank in the last meeting we had down at that church that they were going to get to be commissioner anymore.
Wow.
That's what happened. Okay.
Wow.
You're going to be fired. And there was a lot of people from Skidaway Island, and I'm just going to tell you, a lot of people told those county commissioners about their engineering department that if they kept on with this, you're going to be fired. You will not serve in that position anymore. Oh. And it's their strength in numbers. And one of the things you always have to be on the lookout for is that I've only ever seen one plan or one strategy, and that is to divide and conquer. And one of the things that we do on my side of town between me and Miss Kent, Sabrina Kent, who's my dear friend, my neighbor, She does the Nottingham Neighborhood Association from Sandfly to Isle of Hope down to Ferguson Avenue. One of the things, and I think she's the last person that had to say this in a meeting, to stand up and tell an official, you're not splitting us up into groups. Anything you've got to say, you say to us as a whole. This is the whole community. Say it to us, because when you want to split us up in groups, all you're trying to do is divide and conquer.
Right.
And turn these people here against these people over there. That is a worn out strategy. Nobody believes that.
You know, Savannah has been led by some very true, skilled politicians who specialize in gaslighting, and they have created a culture within local government that's consistent with making people believe that they are king and that the buck starts and stops with them. And tonight at a neighborhood association, one of the things I campaigned on was inspiring, in addition to advocacy and accessibility, I added that I wanted to inspire people to take their rightful place in owning government, right? Positioning themselves to where they do not ask us for what they want. They do not beg us for what they want, but they simply tell us and demand of us what it is that their needs are and how we can meet them, but more importantly, hold us accountable. And it pained me, Miss Scott, it pained me so much to see how two leaders, and I'm just going to be candid with you, Chester Ellis and Van Johnson, how they get up in a room and it's like they just snow the people, right? It's like they have this gift and this skill, and I just sat there cringing and like holding my breath, looking around the room at people like, are you really believing what they're saying? And it's such apathy, and it makes you feel like, if what you are doing, is it really making a difference, and does it really matter? Because if people are apt to believe what they're being sold, you know, take for example how the media has gotten so involved in politics, to where, as opposed to holding elected officials accountable, they have taken a side. And so they have taken a side so much so that they actually carry the water of the establishment. They carry it through their papers and they carry it through the airways. And so what advice do you have for me in terms of how do you promote helping people understand that there's strength in numbers? How do you survive in this world where you're trying to change and save the city with apathetic attitudes like that?
Well, I can tell you, and if my partner was here, Sabrina Kent, she would tell you the same thing. The retaliation against us was over the top. They came after me. They went after Miss Kent. They went to Mr. Kent's child. So I'm just going to tell you that they will retaliate against you. I think that is just a tactic that they use, and I survived it, and so did she. We got through it, but we knew what it was. So they will retaliate against you. But basically, I get out and knock on doors. At the time, we had probably over 10,000 signatures back in 2006 that came from Bacon all the way down to Isle of Hope. And that was just a matter of us meeting amongst ourselves and talking without the politicians or the news media or anything. And the way that I do it, I'm a facilitator. I say director, president, whatever. I'm a facilitator of information. And what I do is I make people accessible about what we call quality of life issues. Every issue that I have ever addressed has been a quality of life issue. And, you know, destroying historical aspects of our community like sandfly, I mean, to be honest with you, that's why people want to come here. They don't care about if they can ride their bicycle down Skidaway Road. That's the people that they want to come and see. Those are the people they want to meet. And Pinpoint, Georgia, this is another thing. This is another Black community, historic Black community, is Pinpoint, Georgia, down here in my neck of the woods. And I want to bring this up about these 501c organizations, these nonprofits, because everyone needs to be aware on TSPLOST that the people that would be allocating the money and what project it goes to sits on an MPC, what they call MPO core board.
Mhm.
And that board has been lined with these Bike Savannah people, and people like the Savannah Tree Foundation. And I don't have anything bad to say about those people or whatever, but I don't want to know where they have achieved such power that they can, start allocating funds and they get to make a decision about gentrifying a Black neighborhood. Where did they get that kind of power? They get that kind of power because, and I know who it was. It was Nick Palumbo that put that Bike Savannah. There's two people, right off the top of my head, but sit on that board, and these people are in charge of allocating taxpayer funding. How did that happen?
Well, I think it's through acts of misleading people. And I know that for the most part, the individuals who are a part of these groups are they have well intentions, but the leaders who lead them do a poor job of striking a balance between helping us to maintain our culturally blended neighborhood and creating these projects or these products. In addition, it's a lack of education and communication that goes forth. It's like the winners take all approach is what they engage in. I want to go back to the Speedwell Church. You sent me a couple of pictures, and I'm going to have the images. You sent me 4 pictures. I'm going to have the images put up, and I just want you to talk about those images. Producer, can you put up the first?
That's Mr. That's Mr. Kemp and the elders of the church, which would be, you got the Kemps, the Grants, you got the Lutons, of course.
That was my student.
Yeah, that's Mr. Kemp. Yeah, you can read that. And that book is called Places in America, Isle of Hope. And the Isle of Hope community dedicated the whole center of their book, because of what was happening to Sandfly and the way they were being treated. They dedicated the whole center of their book to the history of Sandfly. And there is pictures of all their churches, because there's more than just Speedwell. The other 2 aren't endangered right now. But that one was very important because that's the one that they always go after. But to really talk about the history of these people and what they meant to us, to all of us who live down here, who live with them, about how wonderful they are. And I'm telling you, the best food in Savannah comes right out of that church. If you ever see them cranking up the grills across the street for the fundraiser, the building fund,
yes,
they have to get the place down there because everybody's showing up. And they usually have fish and grits, or you can get barbecue chicken. But they sit, across the street on their field over there where that's where they have extra parking on First Communion Sunday. They crank up those grills. That's how you know it's on.
I remember that.
They are the best cooks.
Mm-hmm. And what's this next?
Yeah, I always get my mama a fish plate.
What's this one, Miss Scott?
You can read that. That's Mr. Kemp was the contributor to that. And those are the elders there. And God bless Tom Barton when he published my letter that really exposed the people behind the Skidaway Road project and what was happening at the time, for writing that companion piece. But they had on that Sunday, he put it in there on Sunday morning, and the pastor at the time that was involved in all of that, was involved with these politicians. He had to walk across the street, and what he did not know is what was going on behind the scenes. But all of those people and all of their relatives filled that church up. It was standing room only. And all I can say is somebody stood up and called him Judas. And it was all she wrote. And then the following Sunday, 2 other politicians went to sit in that church, and they didn't get a very good reception because all of a sudden it wasn't like me running, telling a tale. And that's what I always tell people. I don't want anybody to believe what I tell them. I come with a paper trail. I had all of their emails, everything. So there was no denying about who was involved and who did what, or that the fact that that church that they had basically sold that church off and had not told any of the congregants or anybody that has supported that. They didn't tell anybody.
Wow.
But he had to walk across the street that Sunday and go in that church, and did not realize that there'd probably be about 400 or 500 people in the congregation that day that he had to explain things to.
What's our name?
Divine intervention.
Yeah, I would say so. We had a couple more pictures. I think you probably described those in the other two, but it was important for me to have you on tonight to give this perspective, Ms. Scott, because we have received a little bit of pushback and ridicule for our advocacy for blocking TSPLOST. You know, they are crediting us with blocking it, but then saying we didn't block it, because Savannah, most of Savannah actually voted for TSPLOST, but it actually failed in the county, where that is where the bulk of the benefit of TSPLOST would have gone. Very little of the benefit would have been for Savannah. And so I appreciate your availability tonight. I appreciate your openness tonight, because your presentation serves as validation for what it is that we are trying to do here in the city of Savannah. And
I want to, if you don't mind, I'd like to say one thing to the people in the neighborhoods over in West Savannah. My mother was a missionary, and we housed and fed Habitat for Humanity that will go put roofs on elderly people. My mother knows more people in West Savannah than I do through her work as a missionary. There's many wonderful people over there. I believe that they're trying to gentrify those people. That's one of the reasons that I spoke up. I've been watching this for 2 decades. Don't doubt your gut feeling about it. If you feel like they're trying to do something to you, they are.
Well, that's my gut feeling. It has been for a long time. And one of the things I have been saying for over a year now, if something does not change in the next 2 to 4 years, the communities of Cloverdale, Carver Village, Brickyard, and Flatma Village will be communities that we once knew. They will look so much different from what they look like today. As I left the West Side today, there is a comedy show happening at the arena as we speak. And to see how invasive this arena project has become to that community, it nauseates me. It grieves my spirit. And to know that politicians are still going about, even as this is happening in the face of people, and this is what happens when folks become so conditioned to certain behaviors. They don't really know or realize that they are being abused or taken advantage of or are on the take. But to stand up in the face of it and be criticized for it, and not by everyone. Fortunately, Ms. Scott, people are waking up and they're getting it. And we no longer have to fight as hard. You know why? Because the rhetoric has not measured up to what they said they were doing or going to do, right? Nothing has changed between the last administration and this administration. Well, a lot has changed. I'll tell you what's changed from the previous administration to now. Crime is up, poverty is up, we have more forced displacement, and the morale is lower than it ever has been in almost every department within the city of Savannah. That's what's changed. That's what's changed. And people are now recognizing that. And so some of the strong critique we used to get, people are now starting to get it. But I guess it's that selfish part of me that wants everybody to be on board with helping us demand the change that we need to see. And we should not wait to vote someone out of office to derive at that change. We should demand it now.
Well, I will tell you, and this is going the 2 decades that I have done this, I have not seen anybody deviate away from the plan that was in place back in 2004. I mean, the minute that they're voted in, and I will tell you that they go, and you've probably been through this process, by the time they go to that Chamber of Commerce board meeting, I think each candidate does a question and answer privately. I know of 2 people that have done that. Pretty much decides on who gets to run for office here.
Right.
I mean, it's a very jaded system. I watched you, and I thought, and one of the things that really struck me, I wanted to say this to you, when you were in a meeting and you brought up a question about the city manager's car that the city of Savannah was having to purchase. And I won't go into the whole thing, but I watched somebody online really throw some shade on you. And I mean, I went after them like nobody's business. I said, well, I would like an answer to the question that she asked. Maybe that's why you're saying something about her. She's asking a question that you want to, sweep under the rug. Well, I want to know the answer to that question. If we're buying a car for the city manager, like we bought one for the mayor, are then we giving them a car allowance every month, and are we hiring them a chauffeur? I mean, I think that's a fair question. That money comes out of my paycheck and everybody else's paycheck.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I want to say good job. I hope you'll continue doing that. I really have a lot of respect for you for standing up and asking that question. And personally, I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you too, Miss Scott. Thank you so much. I'm not on a quest to call people out, but what I do want to do is what the citizens of Savannah sent me to do, right? And that is to assure that the coffers of the city of Savannah are being appropriately allocated, resourced, and delved out. And that's what we want to do. And so I can't help but ask questions when something is presented before me that doesn't make sense or doesn't pass the smell test. And so what we are not are rubber stamps. I'm not a rubber stamp. I'm not going to say yes to everything that's in front of me. And I am so proud that I have been able to resist the payouts over and under the table. I don't take the rides in the private jet. I don't go to the dinners at the Chatham Club. I don't have a car account for a BMW or a Mercedes. No one's offered to put on an addition on my house that I've taken, so, I've resisted those pieces that take us away from the altruistic spirit we entered into office. I firmly believe that people who ran alongside me in 2019, and I didn't know any of them personally, I knew no one, but what I felt was a sense of excitement in that I was coming to work with a group of people who were seeking to do good. But Ms. Scott, in short order, what I saw happen right before my very eyes, I had skilled politicians in the persons of Van Johnson and Estella Shabazz who knew the value of a 5-vote majority. And they were on the race to get and garner 5. And in their getting and garnering 5, they did everything possible to divide us. And that's the primary reason why this council is so divided. But fast forward from there, now the goal is, if you can't control, you have to sully and you have to discredit. And so I feel like we've passed the test. We've stood the test of time. We're going to continue to go forth by faith and not be swayed by those experiences that we have. And, there's a saying that I live by. For those who matter, they won't mind. And for those who mind, they never really matter. But where we are today is in position to continue to serve the whole Savannah. And I know that the people who need what we are fighting for, they have no complaints. The people who care about people who need what we're fighting for, they have no complaints. The people who do not want us spending money on things we do not need, they have no complaints. People who do not want their taxes raised one dime in the face of eggs costing $7 a dozen, they do not mind. And so for as long as those individuals are a part of who we're serving, I know that we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And I don't know how or where I found you, but I'm just glad that the Lord saw fit for our paths to cross. And I'm encouraged as we go forth that people like you will keep your eye on us and not tell me what I want to hear, but tell me what I need to hear and hold us accountable and keep coming with those historical nuggets that a few of us have forgotten and don't remember. But thank you for reaching back and bringing that present for us tonight. And I'm going to be bugging you a little bit more too on some more topics.
I tell you, one of the things that I would like to see, the only thing holding Bacon Park and Sandfly back from going on the National Registry of Historic Places is a letter from City Council. And I guarantee you, bring that up, you're going to be very divided. That will tell you the truth behind what.
Well, let's
tell that story.
Well, let's try it. Let's see what happens.
All right.
When is the next neighborhood association meeting for Bacon Park?
We're going to plan one. Christmas is coming up, and I'm probably going to try one for the 1st of December and have our police there, crime watch meeting, and get together and make it a little festive to see my neighbors. And soon we'll get out and start passing out newsletters when I find out what's been going on. It's a vast community, small but mighty.
Well, give me a buzz, keep me posted, and we'll definitely be there. Listen, Miss Scott,
absolutely.
You have been generous with your time tonight. I appreciate your sharing and stopping in, and we'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you so much, Kesha. Good night.
Yes, ma'am. Good night to you. Listen, everyone, it has been a wonderful night. I'm so glad Miss Scott stopped by to see me and to share with us. We are just so grateful that when people just out of the blue just pop up with what you need. And I was delighted to be able to share that with you tonight. We're going to keep going forth in the spirit of the Savannah that we want to see. And without further ado, I will be coming back to you probably by midweek to share some more information with you. But listen, Savannah, always know I love you and I'm not tired yet. Good night, y'all.
Like this.